All right, welcome. In the next few minutes, we're going to build a mental framework to help you absolutely conquer one of the trickiest topics for your UGC NET exam, the Victorian Era. Let's turn this complex period into your secret weapon. To get a sense of things, just look at this number. This was an age of explosive, almost unbelievable change. The population of England more than doubled, going from 14 to 32 million. That completely reshaped, well, everything. So that brings us to the big question. 64 years of literary revolution. How do you even begin to tackle that for an exam? It seems pretty daunting, right? But here's the secret. It's not about memorizing endless facts. Nope. It's about understanding the core conflicts that drove every single author and movement. So let's dive in. Here's our game plan. We'll start with the challenge. We'll build a solid foundation with two core ideas. Check out the key authors, map the movements, and then wrap up with a concrete strategy for your exam. Okay, so listen up, because everything you really need to know about this era rests on understanding just two central tensions. These two ideas basically defined the entire Victorian consciousness. So, pillar number one, the massive social upheaval from the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it created a society of just shocking contrasts. On one hand, you had incredible wealth, and on the other, you had poverty and social unrest like never before. And this led to something called the condition of England question, a term you absolutely have to know. It became a kind of moral obsession, and it directly led to the rise of the social problem novel. This is a key genre you're definitely going to be tested on. So think of books like Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South. Carlyle really attacked what he called the cash nexus. It's a powerful idea. What happens when our relationships with each other are boiled down to just money? This is a question that writers like Dickens and Gaskell just wrestled with again and again in their novels. And then we have pillar number two, the crisis of faith. This was a bombshell. New scientific discoveries, especially Darwin's Origin of Species, just shook people's beliefs to the core. If science could explain creation, then what was the role of God? How can morality even exist without a divine purpose? That doubt, you'll find it echoing through practically all of Victorian literature. Okay, so now let's see how these two pillars, that's the social question and the faith crisis, how they really shaped what everyone was writing about. The novel just completely took over. Why? Well, it was the perfect medium for what was going on. It was great for realistic social observation, for teaching moral lessons, and because printing got cheaper and you had stories published in parts and magazines, it could reach this huge new middle-class audience. Now, this is really cool. Look at how this table connects right back to our two pillars. You can see how a writer like Dickens, especially in a novel like Hard Times, is tackling that condition of England head-on. Meanwhile, George Eliot's work is all about the crisis of faith, exploring how to be a good person without religion. And then the Brontes, well, they carved out this whole new space for exploring the inner self, that private consciousness. Poetry also changed. It moved away from the really individualistic stuff of the Romantics and became more like a public stage, a place for poets to grapple with the era's biggest, scariest intellectual questions. So you have Tennyson and Arnold right there on the front lines, directly confronting that crisis of faith. And then you've got Robert Browning, who uses his famous dramatic monologues to get inside people's heads in this age of uncertainty. You know, in a poem like My Last Duchess, he makes you, the reader, judge this really unsettling speaker. It's brilliant. So with all this traditional faith wavering, a new group of writers popped up. They were called the Sages, and they basically tried to offer moral guidance to a really confused nation. Yeah, this really shows how these thinkers almost became like secular prophets. You had Carlyle thundering against materialism, Ruskin arguing that you can't have great art without a just society, and Arnold offering up culture as a brand new kind of salvation. All right, so all these tensions in society didn't just stay in books. They also sparked entire artistic movements, with each one kind of reacting to the mainstream in its own unique way. So the key word here is reaction. The Pre-Raphaelites reacted against all the ugly industrialization by looking way back to the past. And the aesthetes, what were they reacting against? All the moralizing. They basically declared that art doesn't owe society a thing. Now for the important part. Let's see how all of this builds into a winning strategy for your exam. This is how you turn all this knowledge into actual marks. The UGC NET exam is all about making connections. It's not enough to just know facts in isolation, so your preparation really has to be built on these 3 pillars. You absolutely have to be able to place key literary works next to major historical and scientific events. You'll get questions that ask you to arrange works by date. And hey, notice how Darwin's Origin of Species is sitting right there in the middle? That's no accident. It was a scientific pivot point that poured gasoline on that crisis of faith. Knowing these terms and, crucially, who coined them is so important. They show up all the time in match the following or assertion reasoning questions. For example, you have the angel in the house. That's the Victorian ideal of the perfect submissive wife. And she is the very thing that the new woman you see in Thomas Hardy's novels is actively rebelling against. See the connection? So there you have it. By framing this huge, messy period around these 2 core conflicts, social upheaval and shaken faith, you can go way beyond just memorizing stuff and actually understand the literature. This framework is your key to cracking the Victorian code. But as you prepare, think about this. Their condition of England, their world transformed by new tech, social anxiety, a crisis of belief. What can that teach us about our own time?